Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Barry Merrick. I'm co-founder and CEO at Ivy, and it's my pleasure to introduce all of you to Barry Stamos and Dr. Mary Mbouni. Barry and Dr. Mary, how are you today?
And we're doing awesome.
Doing great.
It's so good to have you here. So at the time of this conversation, it's a Monday. Hope everybody had a nice weekend. Hope everyone is having a good Monday. It's a turbulent time in the markets, but today we're going to be talking about something that's truly timeless. We're going to be focusing on well-being, leadership, and plant medicine. And for many of us, myself especially, this is a subject that I knew almost nothing about until very recently. And it's been transformative and profound for me to learn a lot more about it, to experience quite a lot of it. And I can't imagine anyone better suited to teach us about it than Barry and Dr. Murray. So before we get started, I really want to have everyone here learn about the two of you and learn about why plant medicine is important to you and what's been the personal journey you've had to focus on it. So Barry, let's start with you. How did you get into all of this?
Yeah, so thank you, Barry, and it's an honor to be here with Dr. Marie and the whole Ivy community. I started my journey with plant medicine. Really, I was born into it. My parents, I grew up in a solar passive home in nature, eating raw food. I thought I was deprived as a kid because I had these terrible tofu sandwich lunches that I'd bring to school, and I would do anything to trade those plants for other goodies. So plants have always been a part of my life. It was interesting. In high school, I started experimenting with psychedelics, psilocybin mushrooms. It started early when I was going actually to music concerts like with the Grateful Dead and Fish, and I would find myself using them more recreationally. And then I got more serious about life, and after graduating from college, found myself going to work for the for Fortune 500 organizations. I was a management consultant for a number of years. I was a startup founder who exited in his mid-20s, had a big exit. I became an entrepreneur, worked for Axiom, a global leader in data, and found myself becoming increasingly more successful and increasingly less happy through that process. So it wasn't until I'd say the last kind of 10 years where I started to rekindle my relationship with Mother Nature and plants that have really done wonders to improve my body, mind, and spirit. And I'm blessed to be joined today by Dr. Marie, who is very much at the intersection of science and spirituality as a former MD and also guide with master plants.
Thank you, Barry, and thank you, Barry.
Great names, by the way, right? We got the
Yeah. So my history with plant medicine, I was born in Cameroon, Africa, and Cameroon, Gabon, that region of Africa is the only place in the world where you have iboga, which is one of the master plant medicines. And my mother was really sick. She had cancer and was undergoing treatment that wasn't working, and she was guided to take iboga. However, during those sessions, she wasn't receiving the message. She couldn't hear, she couldn't understand. And she had been guided to ask me to go and be in the ceremony. So I was initiated into iboga at the age of 14. And I was able to receive the medicine from iboga that helped cure my mother, like the cancer went away. So that was my pretty dramatic introduction to plant medicines. And I have to say, after that, I kind of shut it down because I was in high school. I wanted to be exactly like everybody else. Didn't want to acknowledge my spiritual gifts. Then I went into medical school and I pushed it farther away because at those times, nobody really talked about plant medicines. And and I felt like people would think I'm crazy. So fast forward, finished medical school, went into residency, did anesthesiology, which is like high pressure type of specialties. And great successful career, top dog, California. And what I noticed after a while is that, just like Barry, I felt like I was dead inside. I was not alive. I felt like a robot. I just kept going, chasing success. However, I was neglecting and completely ignoring a big part of me, which is the heart, the spiritual part. And it came a time where it just had to stop. And that's when I remembered those parts of me and started, working with plant medicines again.
Amazing. Thank you both so much for sharing. What's fascinating that you have in common, and actually all three of us have in common, is this kind of a deep connectedness in early years, and then getting into, growing up, getting a career, really pushing hard, trying to manipulate the world in the best way we can, still for positive reasons, but feeling a disconnect. And then you found this return through this new work that you're doing. And I think many of us, if not all of us on this conversation, have been at the peaks and troughs of this journey. And before we go deeper into it and really understand the wider perspective here, I do want to just ask, Barry, can you talk a little bit about also the specific, like the organization that you founded with Brandon, One Heart? How did that came to be? So you mentioned you had an exit, then you were working at a huge corporate. Like, how did you actually end up taking the leap and focusing? It's one thing to have a startup, that's really hard enough, but also doing a startup focused on something that's, kind of, something that people have a lot of preconceptions or misconceptions about. How did it all get started?
Yeah, it wasn't until we really started working with plant medicine, specifically master plants like ayahuasca, that we came into our hearts, like our heart space fully. We were so in our heads and we weren't in our hearts. And it allowed us to just drop into this beautiful heart space. And from there, we started birthing One Heart. And we realized we got to create this company from a place of love, and that there's a distinction between consciously creating from your heart and leading from your heart versus this old kind of paradigm or operating system that ultimately was also effective, but left a lot of people hurt through that process, including ourselves. And so what One Heart is now today is we call it, we've created journeys. These are human accelerator programs that typically are 8 weeks long. They include 2 weeks of prep, 1 week on site, and then 5 weeks of integration, where people really land a lot of the lessons that we've been able to gather both individually and collectively as a community, and bring them into their lives and bring them into their work and really bring them in as gifts to their community. So that's a quick high level on One Heart.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So my goals for this conversation, for everybody who's listening, is truly for us to learn from your experiences, but also learn from your expertise, regardless of whether someone's experienced plant medicines, might want to experience it, might never actually want to do it directly, but still wants to learn the key lessons that you've gotten. I want all of us to learn from this and really apply it to our leadership journey. So to help us dive in, now that we know your stories, we'd love to hear the story of plant medicine. So from both a historical perspective and a scientific perspective, what has been kind of like the relationship between human society and plant medicines over time? And what have been the latest scientific trends in the modern world that help us understand it even better?
You want to do the history and I do the science?
I'll kick some things off. All right. So follow me here as we flow and go from the kind of an origin story. So I'm going to say a lot of things, and you feel free to Google them and look up the stats and facts and research. And I'll just acknowledge that the most important thing is what's true for you. They say you're your own guru. So as an origin story, we can go all the way back to, we are from plants, people. We're derivatives from fungus. If you actually look at our family tree, and especially if we, and we have sequenced DNA, there's a great book called Stealing Fire that acknowledges that sacred plant medicines have been used in ceremonies for a very long time. And we can even go back to, the great Egyptian period where these ceremonies and use of master plants, especially blue lilies, were a big part of their daily practice. We can marvel at how they were to achieve incredible feats like, the pyramids and sacred geometry. And it's interesting that much of that has been lost and yet has not left us. The sacred American Indians would use plant medicines to not only cure diseases, but also have visions and really commune with Mother Nature. I am going to acknowledge that the majority of us have a very special relationship with plants. Most of you woke up this morning and had a cup of coffee or tea, or even more interesting, matcha, right, which is a more sustained energetic high. And so we're constantly looking at plants to alter our states of consciousness. Big Pharma has been leveraging plants for a very long time to find cures to diseases. It's a big part of the Western world today. Most of us right now that are watching this are either at home or at work. And perhaps like Barry or us, there's a plant that's in the room with you. Studies have proven that actually increases happiness. I would encourage you to go out and get some house plants, form a relationship, and see if that's true too for you. Brandon and I, when we first birthed One Heart, launched a company called Superwell. The value of superfoods is profound. We've seen what's happened with ancient nutrition, billion-dollar valuations, etc. So there's a huge opportunity for everyone watching this right now to consciously consume plants like ashwagandha powder and cacao. Cacao used to be only reserved for like the social elite, or given on the day that they're sacrificing you as you ascend up the Mayan temple. So these are incredible plants that we can really, hold with reverence and respect, and not only benefit from our body improving vis-a-vis health and wellness, but our minds. There's incredible advancements in leveraging superfoods, even nootropics for mental clarity. Athletes who are on plant-based diets that are achieving, not only peak performance athletically, but also, also intellectually, setting new records. And so, and then of course, there's an interesting aspect to how we're leveraging a lot of these plants now spiritually. And so that's a little bit of a real big picture. And now maybe Dr. Marie can come in with the science. Yeah, some science.
Yes. And, it's really important that we all realize how present plants are in our lives. Even when we look at pills that we take, those pills start from plants. In recent years, what I've noticed is that the scientific community finally started placing a spotlight, started really taking interest in all the effects that these plants have. I want to mention something, since we're talking about leadership, that a lot of leaders, entrepreneurs, high achievers, they're stressed, they're on medication. Like during my medical practice, and I practiced medicine for 17 years, there was not a day that I didn't see someone either on anti-anxiety, antidepressant, sleeping medicine, like every day for 17 years. And that is an epidemic. Even doctors are stressed, overwhelmed. super busy, not present either for their lives, their families, their communities.
Yeah, doctors are humans too. Isn't it like 2/3 of doctors are facing serious issues? And I know a Harvard study said that 96% of leaders are experiencing extreme stress, anxiety, and 1 in 5 are having sleep issues. So yeah.
So the recent research, really came to light when they discovered the effects of this master plant medicine on cognition, on sleep, on depression, post-traumatic stress disorder. And a lot of huge cohort studies are being done in Europe with psilocybin for post-traumatic stress disorder. And the other thing that has been discovered is that because these plants have an effect where they actually work on preventing neuron deaths in your brain, they're being studied for Alzheimer's, they're being studied for rapid healing of treatment-resistant depression, because many people have anxiety and depression that are not able to be healed with traditional therapies or medications. And what they're discovering is that when you use these plant medicines, people can get off their medications and they can actually heal. So a lot of that research going on. The sleep, the anxiety, also being going on. And my hope is that it really gets bigger in the United States. We're just at the beginning stages of really leveraging the power of these plants with the research that's being doing here. Walter Reed, the Army, they're doing all this research, but it hasn't been really publicized or really brought out to the wider public. But yeah, the effects are huge.
Thank you so much. That was an excellent summary of both the recent research, the recent also societal issues, where clearly plant medicine aside, in general, the amount of medications being used is, for different things is quite a lot compared to historical norms. And Barry, that was an excellent also overview of the historic big picture. I just want to straight up address the elephant in the room, right? If this kind of plant medicine has such positive benefits, what caused it to not enter the mainstream pharmaceutical industry? What happened what are the risks or misperceptions, misconceptions, whatever it may be? Why was it so kind of off the radar for so long? And then also, why is it making such a huge newsworthy impact right now, right? So many magazines for the last few years have been covering these incredible potential impacts of these medicines. Truly, if you had to lay it out, what are the legitimate maybe risks, concerns, and then what are the misconceptions the way you see it as objectively as you can?
Awesome. So I get the opportunity to work with a lot of top founders, a lot of CEOs from big companies, and the simple answer, and this generally doesn't get shared publicly, but master plants are bad for business. They're bad for big pharma, right? So as Dr. Marie just shared, a lot of these, prescription meds are no longer needed by individuals that are working with these plants successfully. So it's bad for business would be one, right? A lot of the businesses that have been set up. That's kind of more of a business answer. Two, a lot of the shamans that I get the opportunity to speak with and learn from have said that it's actually the plants now that are reaching out to humans. That there's an intelligence, if you will, within the plants that have been here since the dawn of time, and that it's time that right now they awaken humanity. And what's fascinating, I find, is that these plants have the ability to allow us to increase our consciousness, to tap into higher levels of consciousness. And from those higher levels of consciousness, see the world differently, behave differently, create things differently, be with community differently. And so I find that that's also interesting. I think there's a socio kind of economic aspect as well. I studied, economics and politics at Cambridge University in England for a very short time, and what I was able to gather and ascertain before I got recruited from Anderson, now Accenture, is that right now what's in, it continues to be cash, right? People want to make money and they view that as being successful. And yet more and more people are starting to realize that there's more to life than cash. There's consciousness, and this psychedelics revolution that's either being rebirthed or is coming up in many ways is a wave of change as we elevate the global community to wake up and start behaving differently, given a lot of what we're seeing in our day-to-day reality. And so, I remember growing up and seeing Bill Clinton on screen saying, I smoked, but I didn't inhale, right? And now we have marijuana legal in, the majority of states. I want to plug a book by Michael Pollan, How to Change Your Mind, which is a bit of an anthem. I mean, a lot of people like me that were doing psilocybin mushrooms in high school, and perhaps you were able to tell your parents, perhaps you weren't. This is a beautiful book to read and or gift to increase education through information, where you see clinical studies that are proving that, just like Dr. Marie says, 80% of participants are no longer experiencing depression. Anxiety. A third are saying that it's the most incredible experience they've ever had in their life, and are now in love with their life, or waking up to this beautiful world around us.
No, I agree. I agree with you that there is an awakening actually happening in society right now, where people are realizing that the old model of success is no longer valid, where it's about making money. And, one day when you're 65, you retire and you finally start living your life. And it's like, no, I'm alive right now and I get to have it all.
Yeah.
And it's possible.
Yeah. Can I just share too? Tim Ferriss, for those of you that follow Tim Ferriss, the 4-Hour Workweek, he's been on record saying almost all of the billionaires he knows regularly use psychedelics, right? So that they can get out of their mind and think differently and come up with disruptive ideas. I'm working in this space, and it's incredible. It's a big part of the creativity process, right?
Yeah, and the way the brain works is, what people don't realize is that the brain likes habitual things. It likes what it knows, and the brain does what it thinks that you want. So if you've always thought the same way, it's really hard to get outside of the box. It's hard to be creative, to follow your intuition, and to just sit with an idea. And when you take these master plans, you're able to get like a bird's eye view. You get to zoom in, zoom out, go spatial. And so when people see that, and when they experience that, they share it and they talk about it. That's why you have this resurgence of, let's elevate our consciousness. I wanted to address a little, when you said, why have they, plants haven't been so popular? First of all, what Barry said, was really, really relevant. And also, a lot of these plants are not legal in, many countries in the United States. So it's really hard to, at this time, really share them in a vast way. Number two, the plants themselves are also coming online. People are feeling called, they accidentally listen to your podcast or see an article or a book and they become curious. And that's how it's been happening.
That somebody says that they call it the cosmic cookie trail.
And another favorite quote that I love is, taking ayahuasca is like having 10 years of therapy in 1 week. So that's another industry. And I want to address this as a medical doctor and also as a healer and spiritual guide at the same time, which is, many people go to therapy and, they spend 10 years and they can't say, I'm angry at my mother, like after 10 years, right? Because it's not about healing. And therapy is usually, and I'm not saying therapy is not okay, please. What I'm saying is that it's not about resolving or healing. It's mostly about understanding with the brain. And what I want to bring forward is that there is no way you can understand trauma. There is no way you can understand pain. It can be explained to you for years and years and years, and you're still not going to understand it. It's not natural. So with these plant medicines, you can heal that. You can let go. You can forgive. You can transcend and really release that from your life so that you can move forward in your full potential and your full power. That's what has been my experience.
Thank you. Thank you both. That was powerful and beautiful. What I want to do next is, on the one hand, I really want to get an idea from both of you before we go into the whole spectrum of, like, you know, from green tea all the way to ayahuasca and everything in between. There's a whole spectrum out there, right? Before we go into those specifics, I really want to kind of understand from you the in and out, like the really what's happening. So when different, obviously, medicines have a different impact on the mind, but in general, if you were to just summarize, like, what's actually happening in the brain when someone, let's go with ayahuasca, as that's one that, you know, a lot of press and a lot of people are very curious about and a lot of people are getting to experience recently. What's actually happening in the brain? Okay, just from a chemical perspective as you see it. And then on the other side of it, what are the general impacts? Like, if you had to come up with like a group of like outputs, like as a result of this, these are the impacts that we're seeing people have. So, and then from there, we'll go into the kind of spectrum of like what's out there and how it all works, like from a process perspective. But before we get to the process, let's get into like what actually happens.
So I'll start with the brain thing and you go with the effects.
Perfect.
So when you take ayahuasca, so ayahuasca is made from two things. There's a vine, B-capi, to make it easy for people to pronounce, and also Psychotris viridens or chacruna. So these two substances really work synergistically. The vine has dimethyltryptamine, which is DMT, and the bush, the chacruna, has an enzyme that inhibits, what would normally disrupt or destruct the DMT. So you ingest it as a tea by mouth, and it goes in your stomach. And normally, if you did that without the chacruna, it would just be destroyed and metabolized, and you would, just eliminate. So with the chacruna, you have MAOI, monoamine oxidase inhibitor, which is an enzyme that makes sure it doesn't get destroyed. And so you absorb it, it goes in your bloodstream, and then it goes in the brain. Normally, things shouldn't go in the brain because there's such a thing called blood-brain barrier. Your brain only allows what it wants to go inside. So with this, the medicine, the DMT, is able to get inside your brain. And when it gets in your brain, it interacts with serotonin receptors and sigma receptors. And so I'm just going to keep it that simple so we don't get into too many complicated words. And so a lot of antidepressants, for example, everybody knows that SSRIs, serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So it's about serotonin and sigma. So then you start having an intense internal immersive experience. You have visuals, you have cognition, you have knowings, you receive messages, you receive insights, you receive downloads. And so this journey happens for hours. And during that journey, you can receive healings, you can receive, some people have received their books, their TED Talk, their, like, so many things that happen. Usually when you get to, maybe it depends on people, after a few minutes or maybe a few hours, you then purge, which is, you put out the medicine, and it actually is the beginning of even another more intense experience where usually you get the information you need, you get the insights you need. So that's one part. That's the serotonin. The sigma receptors are the ones that are active for neurons, like neuroplasticity, repatterning the way your brain talks, the way your cells talk to each other, the way your left brain and your right brain talk. The corpus callosum, which, is the connection between both sides of your brain, becomes really plastic and they can talk to each other. It works on preventing your neurons from dying, because we have a program in our body called apoptosis, which is a programmed cell death. Like after a certain time, your cells die. And we also have enzymes, telomerase, which literally are at the end of your DNA, that also work on that programmed death. And when you take ayahuasca and it works on the sigma receptors, it's able to modulate all those neurotransmitters. And it works on your mood. So a lot of effects, and it's really complex in the brain. And I'll stop there so I don't get too geeked out or everybody else geeked out.
That was excellent. Thank you, Dr. Murray.
Awesome. That was awesome. So Michael Pollan in his book, How to Change Your Mind, describes it like shaking up a snow globe, right? I mean, you just shake up this snow globe and then things start to shift and repattern and fall as they are meant to. What we've seen on here at One Heart is that the work does wonders for individuals emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. So many people coming into the journey might have suffered, as you shared, trauma. It could come from their childhood. Yes, there are individuals who have experienced domestic abuse. Others perhaps, at some point were in a relationship where, they could have been physically raped. Everybody has something, including, by the way, people who said, I had a perfectly normal childhood and have suppressed the memory when you got called out with your hand in the cookie jar. This might be personal to me. It's all relative, it turns out, for people in terms of the severity. There's an opportunity through working with these medicines to clean up anything that's part of your past that's holding you back from being all that you're meant to be. We have founders that have come in that are completely burned out. They're running some of the most successful startups in the world today, and yet they're numb. They don't feel or barely can feel. They'll be in an environment with people and beautiful settings and can barely feel what's going on around them. And because of their work with plant medicine, it will awaken all of their senses. In fact, they'll be privy to senses they didn't even know existed beyond the six that we typically speak of today. So opening up that full spectrum of senses, opening up consciousness. So many people who are looking for enlightenment and experience bliss in a moment at yoga, during Shavasana, right? Or are training for a triathlon and they get in that flow state and can experience that natural runner's high. They're able to more freely tap into what I call super consciousness regularly and freely, and wake up to the wonder and miracle that is life. And when people talk about, you want to experience a miracle, actually our brother Pablo talks about, if you want to experience a miracle, breathe. And I remember hearing people say that on podcasts and be like, whatever, right? I don't get it. And I would, and Brandon studied Kabbalah for 6 years, and I would go fly to meet with this guru and that guru. And, intellectually I was processing it, but I didn't get it. And in, 1 or 2 or 3 sessions with ayahuasca, for example, you can't help but not get it. This notion of universal consciousness, this notion of oneness. Yeah. And once you've experienced that, like you described with the neuroplasticity in the brain doesn't know the difference. So many people are following Dr. Joe Dispenza, and how, by having a simulated experience or a real experience, we've experienced it. And once you've experienced it like a rubber band, you can't go back to the same pattern, but you can get out of your brain for a moment to look at yourself objectively. One of our shamans says, ayahuasca doesn't make me a better person, it makes makes me want to be a better person. And I think that's super important, because I remember not touching ayahuasca because I was worried it was going to make me crazy. I was like, oh, I don't want to go and do that. And then all of a sudden I'm just going to retreat and, go to the woods and live the rest of my days, in some hippie commune or what have you. And yet, like, I've been able to objectively look at myself from a different vantage point and really inventory, how is my personal wellness? How am I doing, in my life, and be able to go back and retrace, how did I show up in different relationships, and how am I showing up at work? And am I really in tune with this purpose, that I intend to be in service to in my life? And am I being the type of dad or lover that I truly wish to be? And all of this in a compressed state of time, like we shared. Like, I can experience, and this sounds crazy, and yet it's not, lifetimes while on the medicine. Time is an illusion. We made it up. And so working with the right shamans, being surrounded by, people that have, we are energetic beings, if you really get it. We're, there's a frequency or vibration, vibrational energy that we emit, and it works in business. Yeah. Like, you do business with people you like and or love. There's an attraction there. And when you're living your life with love, and when you're able to open up and actually, we've seen people within the One Heart journey, actually be able to open up in relationship. And for some, it's like, okay, coincidentally, I met the one like a month later. No, you just opened up. People going back to, their wives or their husbands and falling in love again.
Absolutely.
We know this is happening in clinical trials. We see it happening every time we do a journey. Yeah. And I think we're living examples of that. And so too are so many members of the tribe. I'll also say, though, that this stuff can also be a flash in the pan, right? People can go and have these sacred ceremonies and really have this remembrance and become fully aligned and intuitively start making decisions in business and start showing up as the, in the highest version of themselves, only for that, just like a diet, to fall apart fast, which is why integration programs are so important, right? After ceremony, like being a part of an integration program, being surrounded by a community that embodies and emanates this, this sacred knowledge and wisdom that holds each other high, where we stand in solidarity with each other in community, and really, make sure we don't slip in that regard. I'd be remiss not to plug Paul Austin, who's part of the One Heart tribe, is also the founder of The Third Wave, and thethirdwave.co has a load of information for people that are looking at, what plant medicine should I consider, and I'd like to learn more about each type of plant medicine and integration programs and where to do it, etc. That's a tool, but ultimately you get to feel and flow and follow that the symphony of synchronicities that happen as people talk to you about it, and where you are ultimately guided.
Yeah, I want to just add something really quick that, when I talk to people after journeys, is that clarity.
Yeah.
Clarity is huge, because a lot of high achievers, entrepreneurs, leaders, sometimes lose their clarity, their true north. Discernment is really, really new. And alignment. Am I being who I say I am? Am I doing what I say I'm going to do? Am I showing up how I say I'm going to show up? Yeah. Those are key. So, yes.
Thank you both so much. That was so beautifully put. And it's truly extraordinary. Like, if we really zoom out and think, the way Dr. Marie described, you take this vine and you take this bush and you drink this tea, and it leads to all the things that both of you mentioned for so many people, is truly extraordinary. And it reminds us that there's so many miracles in life, like breathing, as Barry said. So what I want to do now for everyone here is switch gears and now get into the more practical next steps. And I encourage everybody who's listening, if you have questions, we have a Q&A box at the middle bottom of the screen. So any questions you have, feel free to type it there. And I'll do my best to get through all the questions that we receive. Try to submit them over the next 5 minutes if you can. So practical next steps. Now, there is a spectrum And interestingly, when I've anecdotally spoken to people about plant medicine, there's some people who say that, oh, they've experimented with everything, but like ayahuasca, it's too much. Like it's too scary for them. For example, there are people who react like that. There are others who've never experimented with anything, and they've gone ahead and just done ayahuasca as their first experience of plant medicine. It would be great if, in a nutshell, you could kind of share with us like the spectrum of plant medicines, and you kind of half-jokingly talked about like tea and coffee, but it's real, like matcha, tea, and coffee, all the way. And if you could just share like what are the different, like how does someone's journey with plant medicine, like is there a progression that you recommend, or is it really kind of like progression agnostic? Like you should just like, dive into what feels right based on everything you read and you research. So if you could share with us the spectrum, and then from there, I want to dive into specifically with like a one heart journey, the way you approach plant medicine with all the prep work, the actual ceremonies, and then the integration. And then from there, we'll dive into audience questions.
Okay. So in my experience, plant medicines usually call. So there's not necessarily a progression. I'm going to start with coffee, then I'm going to go to this, and then I'm going to go to that. And in this world, people will resonate with certain plant medicines. They just feel that I like this one. I want to experience this one. You don't have to have done plant medicines or psychedelics to sit with ayahuasca. You don't need that. And so I encourage everybody to really, honor like what they feel and not what somebody tells you to do. Like what is true for you. And you'll complete that. There's a wide variety of plant medicines coming, from minor plants like coffee, tea, and these plants have been known for thousands and thousands of years. Tobacco is called the king of the jungle. It's a master healer plant, not cigarettes, but working with tobacco where it's the smoke, that is not being inhaled. That smoke can actually clear the energetic field. You have plants like peyote, which has mescaline, which is, contains DMT type substance. So it's a psychedelic. San Pedro, which is a cactus. You have cacao, which is also a master heart healer, from the Aztec. You have, changa, sananga, so many different plants that people use. And then you have the master ones, ayahuasca, iboga, that are really like the grandfather and the grandmother. There are many more, but those are the most common ones that people know in the world.
Yeah, and I would encourage everyone, to hold a mirror up and really see what's coming up for you in terms of facing your fears. Because on the flip side of your fear is freedom for that fear. So, for example, I had someone come through One Heart that said, I'm really worried about doing ayahuasca because I heard it's the vine of the soul and I feel like I'm going to see my death. And I said, yeah, and imagine if you did, right? Imagine if you did face like your biggest fear, which is dying, and that's common. And then for the rest of your life, you had the freedom to live fully. Right? Would you want to face your fear for those 4-6 hours, whatever it took? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when people face those fears, I find on the flip side, there's just incredible breakthroughs. So I would really look into, do you want to live your life with fear or live your life with love? Are we making decisions from fear? Or are we making decisions from love? So I think there's something there. I had heard, like Dr. Marie shared, from spiritual leaders as well as others, oh, well, ayahuasca will call to you, right? And so I remember when Brandon called me and he's like, we're going to go to this ayahuasca ceremony. It's in Tulum, it's all arranged. I was like, brother, I'm sorry, but the medicine hasn't been calling me. He's like, dude, I'm calling you. Like, this is the call. Like, literally, I'm calling you to come with me. How more obvious can you get with a call for ayahuasca? And I just started laughing and I said, okay, fine. I'm going to go for it. I was scared. And when I sat in sacred ceremony and remembered and had the visions I did and the downloads I did, I realized there was absolutely, nothing to be afraid of. This is Mother Nature. I come from Mother Nature. This is all part of the process. So yeah, I will share with you that we've had people, we've had a few hundred people now come through the One Heart journey as alumni. We've had people come through, one in particular I'm thinking of, who had never touched alcohol, never had a cup of coffee, did not want to alter.
I have never smoked marijuana.
There we go. So everybody's got, so we've had people that have never, certainly never touched a psychoactive plant, never had altered their state, and then come in and do the most, one of the most powerful, plants. So it's not like a progression, right? It just comes into, I love the movie The Matrix, right? It's like, here is your choice. And if you choose, there's an awakening, and there's certain types of plants that will awaken at different levels. By the way, Dr. Marie reminds me so much of the Oracle from the movie. When I first met her, I was like, okay. And just like the Oracle told Neo, right? You're not the one, whatever you believe is true. And he was the one. And you can meditate on that one after the podcast.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you both so much. That is a really good clarification for all those who are curious about how to navigate the space. Would love to now hear, we've had more than a dozen Ivy members participate in one of your One Heart journeys. I had the pleasure of experiencing the truly profound experience myself. Just if you could put it into a bit of a on the overall map of how people can experience plant medicines. What are the different options out there? How does a One Heart journey compare to other things? They're not about what's better or worse, just much more about in terms of options. How should people think about those options? And we had actually one of our members, Dr. Benazir, he asked, what's the legal status of psilocybin in the US? If it's not totally legal, how do we recommend we find a high quality source for it or other plants? So if you could just address what's the state of affairs within the United States? Also, we're in the UK with Ivy. How do people, what are people's options, and where does One Heart Journeys fit into that?
Yeah, you can.
Okay, cool. I'll kick it off, and then Dr. Marie can come through.
Yeah.
So first, I want to remind everybody. I mentioned him before. Paul Austin from The Third Wave, thethirdwave.co, has a litany of information about various plant medicines, as well as some reviews on different places where you can go. And there's even a write-up about One Heart Journeys, and he kind of compares and contrasts. So that is a resource. I want to acknowledge that there's many different spaces, places, facilitators, and generally speaking, it's all good. When you're working with these types of energies and plants and spirits, you're going to be cared for. That said, it certainly makes a big difference if you're working with a professional healer. There are some known epic shamans. There's some known not so epic shamans. There are beautiful ceremonies happening every single day all over the world. And I would say that there is an approach here at One Heart that we like to follow, that we believe allows for a very safe container where we can be in service in the highest with reverence to the medicine and those participating in it. So an example, and this isn't just at One Heart, this is also coming from many lineages, including a lot of practices this is specifically for ayahuasca. So following a plant-based dieta, so actually coming into the journey, before even sitting in sacred ceremony, having been ingesting plants and not animals, eating an animal days prior to, for example, an ayahuasca journey may allow you to actually feel that animal's energy and can in some ways interfere with your journey. So really having a kind of a sacred, reciprocity with plants coming in matters. I mentioned integration. I think integration, a lot of the people in the space believe that that's in some ways even more important than the ceremony. You can have a really divine experience. And ultimately, it's what you do with that and how you get in action with that sacred knowledge in your life, in your work, in your communities that really, makes the most lasting impact.
Right.
So having, even if you sit in ceremony and perhaps they don't offer an integration program, seek one out. There are plenty of coaches also who specialize in supporting individuals that are all different, free to all different price points. There are facilities that are licensed that are offering these ceremonies. In terms of legality, for psilocybin mushrooms, for example, there's plenty of clinical trials right now underway. There's places like Amsterdam where you can do them legally with established providers. Places in Jamaica are booked a year out now that are regularly practicing. For ayahuasca, we love Costa Rica and Peru. And there are places there that are known for working with the medicine. And I'd be remiss not to mention that One Heart Journeys is also an opportunity at oneheart.com and we typically get many applicants and for us, all of those things are important and really important are the individuals that we're curating, knowing that they're ready for the medicine, knowing that, if they're on prescription meds, they're ready to start weaning themselves off of them with an MD supporting, knowing that they're ready to set the right, intentions for themselves, personally, professionally, and really working with the medicine with reverence. And I think anyone working with the medicine, ultimately, it's important that they're practicing sacred reciprocity. We're involved with the Amazon and really cultivating and supporting indigenous communities. This is energy, and there is a huge element of spirituality, and this is really important. The people doing that work are following the path and really guided.
So what I'm going to add is that as the person seeking these plant medicines, you are responsible. So really,
That's right.
I want to reiterate, do your homework, interview the shaman or the facility. Like, where does it take place? How do they talk to you before? Do you have a pre-integration and post-integration? Because those are the most powerful elements that will, translate your peak experience into your daily life. So you really want to look at those. Don't just base your choice on reviews that, they post, because you don't know. So there are many questions that you can ask. And the other thing, there was about psilocybin in the United States. Yes, there's a lot of, actually, research has just been approved for the wider public. We're going to copy research that has been, done in Europe for years now. It's just starting. It was just approved by the FDA. The Army, they have been doing research on PTSD because it became such a big thing. However, it wasn't in the public. Psilocybin has been decriminalized a little bit in a few states. However, it's still not completely legal. So when you have providers there, make sure that, you respect their privacy, you respect, however they, if it happens in the United States, really making sure that you protect their privacy.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you both so much. In the last couple minutes we have left, what I'd like to do is, you've been incredibly generous with your time and your energy, your passion, to really help us get this broader picture. And I hope for everybody here, this is, for many of you, or for many of us, it's like a spark, like for us to start thinking about this, getting the perspective. As Dr. Marie said, the key thing is to do your research, do your homework, not just secondary research, but also primary research, call the people involved. And I know that at One Heart, you also, Barry and Brandon as founders, you interview every single person to get to know them and so that they can get to know you as well. So very specifically, if somebody was feeling called and wants to do this in the near term, what are some One Heart journeys coming up that people should keep in mind? And also, if people have more questions for you or want to engage more deeply, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, right on, Barry. So our next journey is actually coming up. It's the end of April. So we'll be going to Costa Rica from the 29th of April to the 6th of May. We have typically more demand than we can supply. And so if you're feeling like you're interested in learning more, I would encourage you to go to oneheart.com. There's about a 5-10 minute online application. Our team reviews those applications, and then some people find their way to Brandon and I for an interview. We also, though, are regularly referring people to a whole network that's global. So irrespective of where you are, where you're willing to travel to, we certainly have many, many beautiful outlets. It's all interconnected. I would share with you a personal bias, and I honor this as a personal bias. And if you have the opportunity to sit in sacred ceremony, there is a distinction from being in a clinical experience and or being in a major city that's full of energies versus being in nature. And really being able to go deep into the experience. And so if you're in the financial position to be able to retreat and go deep into nature, I would encourage that as a personal bias, because these are plants and you can have an amazing experience anywhere you are. Trust the process, trust the shaman, trust the medicine, and allow yourself to experience all that it offers. Obviously, talk to your friends. If you have anybody that that has worked with the medicine, I think we're going to see a lot more people coming out, so to speak. If you had my knowing and you knew what I know in terms of the people that are actively working with the plants, who you're seeing pretty regularly on screen, etc., I think we're going to have a coming out party. It already started. There was a Thank You Plant Medicine hashtag. Thank You Plant Medicine movement that was birthed, that came out this year, and I think that's going to continue to grow as more and more people wake up to realize that we are constantly evolving as humans, and there's a big opportunity to continue to increase our levels of consciousness. Brandon, my co-founder, best friend, wrote a great article for all of you leaders. What ayahuasca, what you won't learn at Harvard Business School that ayahuasca teaches you. Anyway, it's on our website at oneheart.com. I think it's a great one, and I see these as the new principles for leadership. Barry, I know we've talked about some of them in terms of like this idea of competition is bullshit, right? I mean, when are we going to drop the egos and collaborate and start coming together to co-create, as one like nation state, right? Venture humanity and really start to solve these planetary problems. I mean, I love that people are working with the medicine. I love that they're healing individually. And yet the biggest opportunity and what I stand for is what we get to now do collectively when we are able to, really become one, hence One Heart. So aho.
Aho.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful. Our mission at Ivy is also to help people elevate their lives so that they can elevate the impact they have on the world. And both of you did a tremendous job today of getting us to zoom out, see a bigger picture, and regardless of someone's experience, planned or historical with plant medicine, I think this was an absolutely critical conversation for us to be having. So can't thank you both enough. Can't wait to see you both in person soon. And I hope that you get to meet all of our members across our cities sooner rather than later. So thank you both, Barry and Dr. Marie.
Thank you for having us.
Barry, we so are appreciative to you, the team, everybody at Ivy. We realize that some of these topics can be controversial, and yet I believe that we'll look back on this, 10 years from now and see that you were actually a leader in bringing this to many people whose lives wouldn't have changed otherwise. So we honor you and we love you and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much. Feelings mutual. All the best and hope to see you both soon.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. See you all soon.
Thank you.
Bye.